I speak to moms every day at the practice. And Dave and I have a practice in North Carolina. And we have about 5,000 patients, and we've had this clinic for about 20 years. What I have to share about how our children are doing is that the state of our children is not good. The state of their mental health, of their wellness, it's not good. And so I came up with something, because I'm a visual learner, to help us as parents see what it is that is perhaps affecting our children, so that we can ourselves start doing a better job with our children, our grandchildren, the children in the community that perhaps we've been given the opportunity to be able to mold them and put them together. I believe that children are like buildings, and we are the perfect crafter. But we've been given a raw material. And what are we going to do with the raw material? And are we going to be like Ruth, who is if at this time for a purpose? And what is our purpose? And our purpose, I believe, is to make America great, one child at a time. So with that, I will start our little talk. In a moment. And so we are the ones who build the identity of the child. Many years ago, there was a gentleman, also a pediatrician, called Ben Spock. He told us that we actually didn't really know how to raise our children. Our children were there to teach us how to raise them. And the child intuitively knew about himself or herself, and they would tell us how to raise them. And so what happened when this occurred was that our children lost their identity because they were raising themselves. And that turned the child that could be resilient and strong into a child that therefore is weak, because they don't have the core values that they're supposed to have. And so psychologists then came along and told you what your child should be, and that your child should be constructed in the image of what society is. And these are a few people that told us these things. There's a very famous psychologist and another, all telling us that our child can be sort of molded in their image and the image of society, instead of what we knew that our child could be. And there are 4 important parts of a child. These 4 important parts are hereditary environment, education, and the most important part of all that I've seen in my 25 years of practicing pediatrics is the role of the parent. The first one, genetics, immutable, unchangeable. No matter how I try, I cannot make my brown eyes blue. I cannot turn my XY and XX into an XY. These are the things that God has created as an immutable, unchangeable truth, and it's to be used for His good. The second thing is environment. Where did you grow up? Did you grow up in Buffalo or in North Carolina? Did you grow up in China or in Japan? These things will make you a different person. Are you living in a democracy or in a socialist country? These things form you. They can be used for good, but today, in today's society, they're being used not for good, but for the detriment of your child, and perhaps for the good of the society as how they see it. And as you see the village, I'll call it the village, as many famous politicians have used that term as well, and they don't teach our children to respect motherhood, life, the sanctity of life, abstinence, and the things that we know to be good. And so these are the things that we should be talking about on a daily basis. We should be limiting those things in the environment that can change the core of the child, including social media, including things that are detrimental to the child. And they should be reading books, because once they read books, they are forming their own ideas, not somebody else's ideas on what is good and what is wholesome and what is true. And so we should be putting actual education into their minds. And what's the deal about Common Core and what is happening in our schools? Well, Common Core very simply teaches them what to think. And so it teaches them to regurgitate, to say again and again what they've been taught. And differently from that is traditional or classical education. So classical education teaches a child how to think from the basics, from the start, from teaching them how to read in a very simple phonetic way. And when we teach our children how to think, they can think for themselves. And then at the last part is the part of the parent, the most important part of the child in building that child. Because the first time that you look at your child, you know that that child has a personality and a very important character that nobody else is going to have ever again. That child is made up of mom and dad, and as you're building that child, they develop something called milestones of development. And moms will mold these. Well, many years ago, children were potty training when they were closer to a year of age, or maybe even before that. Because the child is supposed to raise themselves, they are the ones deciding things. And so all of these things are supposed to be taught, instructed, guided, molded by the mom. And so manners, politeness are taught. But the most important thing is that virtues need to be taught. They do not learn virtues by themselves, because the child is like the most important, most beautiful building of all. Even Jesus said that his body was a temple. Each one of our children are buildings, they're temples that we raise brick by brick, we form lovingly, painfully. And when we do this, we go deep, we hurt, we have to change ground. And this is how we make our children grow. Not by telling them you're wonderful and you're beautiful all by themselves, although we think they are, but by building them, building their self-confidence, and by working with them so that their self-confidence is a built thing on chores, on things that they do, on our having difficulty in teaching them things that they don't want to be taught. And so we've developed that, and we continue to raise them so that they overcome problems. And so these are the things that also build an identity. What? Having a pride in who you are, where you came from, who's your family. And you talk about these things at the table. You tell them that your grandparents raised you in a certain way, that you would go over there and the problems that they gave you, and who were they. It's just like the stories that we've heard about this beautiful place in Buffalo, and you had so many Revolutionary War heroes in this place. Take your children to see them. They form the child. Take your children to see their parents, your grandparents. Whoever has formed you, make that the vacation. Helping the family in helping the family business, in being farmers and going out there. And that starts to tell them who they are. But the most important thing is to share with your children your values. Don't be afraid. Don't think you're pushing yourself on your child. You tell them what your moral code is. Why do you believe what you believe? How did you come to Jesus if you came to Jesus? What happened at that moment? What were your trials? What were the things that formed you and made you think that you were weak? Because, as I've said, parents are the greatest builders of them all. We are builders of people. We are builders of the generation to come. And so you lay down the bricks one by one. And it comes from the Bible. When you train a child in the way that he should go, when he is grown, he shall not depart from it. He will come back home. And this is what moms intuitively knew. Dads knew this too. That you are the molders, the makers of tomorrow. So I would like you to think about that building America is indeed a mom thing. The power of a mom cannot be overstated. Thank you so much for listening to this talk. Please share it.